Welcome back to Manny Beal and to my deconstruction of Bernardo Kastrup's series Analytic Idealism on the Keto Academy. Before we head into his part 5, the last part or the last bit of his part 4. There was a few aspects that I didn't catch and comment slash deconstruct as well as I might have wanted, listening to it afterwards. While I was sitting here, I'm sort of trying to catch everything I need to sort of comment on, but I might, while I'm thinking, I'm not listening that carefully as I might, and something might slip through that I might have wanted to comment on somehow or another, right? But one thing that I think I commented on it, but not sufficiently, right? But it's this thing. He says, this is the best thing I could come up with. This is the best explanation I could come up with. I mean, philosophy is not about coming up with, in my opinion, right? It's not a coming up with. I have to come up with something. It's like I have to build something. I have to add something to the story, something like that, right? No, you're trying to describe the story that your mind is making already. And also, what part of the story that is your classifications that you add that the mind is not adding by its own accord necessarily, though you could say, well, metaconsciously, it's also part of the mind. So while you think of it maybe as some kind of will or some kind of volition or whatever term you want to put on it, that you create a category like four-legged animals, right? There's not a category arriving from the outside, four-legged animals. That's a category you establish from the inside, from your awareness of your experience, so to say, right? But it's still a description of how you handle your experience. When he's coming up with something, what he's saying and what he has been trying to say to you, I have come up with an explanation of what goes on sort of before it becomes my experience. I have come up with, right? I don't like that coming up with, because you have to reference something, right? And that's why I'm saying he tries to disconnect himself from the qualia, and so he says it's just, something going on that dissociation, as he calls it, right? But that's not really the important part. The important part is I have come up with an explanation that is the mind out there and the pure subjectivity, and that is sort of what I've come up with, right? Based on what? Your experiences. Well, your experiences is on the inside of your mind, right? From the get-go, before you establish that outside, that you apparently think that is just sort of, it is given from the experiences. So at the end of the day, it's as also he said, well, the fact is that if I'm right, well, then you're not right, because if it's an if, it's not a fact, right? So it's sort of, if I'm right, it could be a fact. So I want it to be right, so therefore it's a fact. It's sort of this kind of argumentation. I want it to be the case. You can't refute it, so I can just go ahead and say, well, it's the case because you can't refute it. There's a teapot around Jupiter, right? I don't buy this argumentation. Of course not, man. It's sort of, child level argumentation structure that he uses in order to establish that realm, or not only establish the realm, but attempting to tell you what it is and what it consists of and how it's supposed to be, understood, right? I don't buy it. Okay, let's head into part 5, universal consciousness. And before we head in, I might I'm considering, has he used the term consciousness and mind in an equivocation, or is consciousness different from mind? Because if you can be metaconscious, that must be a different conscious than the normal conscious. Otherwise, it's just the same old soup, right? So it's sort of, it's the same thing, it's all mind, but now I'm going to call it consciousness. And I also will establish something called meta-consciousness. And it's sort of, he says it's all the same thing, but he refers to various aspects as if they're sort of different, right? He's not saying, he's saying basically, implicitly, that a dissociation is different from the mind that is dissociated using this dissociation, right? Though it's all mind, universal consciousness, or mind, I suppose, right? Unless there's difference between mind and consciousness. Then if your consciousness is universal, what is mind then, right? And what is subjectivity then? And what is world? And what is, reality? All these terms he has been using, right? It's like he's just coming up with shit. And, using words sort of, no, I think I'll use this word, right? It's very, very, very fluffy, this. Okay, let's head in.
So the question that immediately arises is, okay, if we are authors of this spatially unbound field of subjectivity that underlies all nature, I will call it universal consciousness in short. If we are authors of universal...
I need to hear that again, sorry.
So the question that immediately arises is, okay, if we are authors of this spatially unbound field of subjectivity that underlies all nature.
Spatially unbound field of subjectivity. So it's all sorts of words that pop up there. It's just, okay, now I'm starting to use these words. Spatially unbound, field of subjectivity. Oh my God, man, right? It's just 3 or 4 new terms that are slammed together and sort of, I'm just going to use the words. I don't need to reference any other thing I've been doing so far. I'm just starting to use words here. And you're going to accept it because you're just a monkey, right? You're a fucking stupid monkey who's, we're all stupid monkeys, but I'm slightly less stupid than you. So I'm just coming up with words that you're going to digest because you're a stupid monkey, right?
I will call it universal consciousness in short.
Universal consciousness. So why do you start out calling it something and now you change the terms, right? Because a interpersonal field of subjectivity or whatever there was, I'm paraphrasing, right? Doesn't entail the things he wants to get to. So now he starts to call it consciousness. It's like now it's sort of, it has its own volition, it has its own will, it has it's sort of its own mind that you're just a little speck of, you're a little separate partition of, right? So he's establishing, changing the words, so we're going in a particular direction that twists it around so you have a particular understanding without him having to establish the actual philosophy necessary to go there, right? For the obvious reason, in my opinion, that he can't. He has to use words, twisting around words with a particular kind of preordained meaning. And by using the words, he is inflicting that meaning on you without you maybe realizing it, right? It's the same principle as if you say to somebody, I think it's an old, example or sort of, right? That if I say to you, don't think of a polar bear, right? Then you have to think about a polar bear in order to think about what you're not supposed to think about, right? So if I say, don't think about a polar bear, that's the only thing you're thinking about, that polar bear. In order to say to yourself, I'm not going to think about it, right? So it's the same kind of thing. By using a certain term, it immediately ignites an understanding in your mind, whether or not you want it or not. And if you're not careful, you are thinking he's doing philosophy, he's just manipulating you using words, right? Be careful, listen carefully, be alert about these kinds of word manipulation, right? Which is basically what it's called sophistry. Um, Sophistry is basically pretending to be philosophy, but it's rather manipulation, right? And it grew out of, the so-called democracy in Athens, where these philosophers turned into be sophists because all sorts of people all of a sudden wanted to be good at arguing for whatever they wanted that could then be established using democracy, right? So they wanted to learn how to argue in order to convince people, and that would not necessarily be philosophical in nature. That would rather be whatever works, right? Therefore, these philosophers turned into sophists, and that was what sort of Socrates, apparently, supposedly, was against, right? They had turned into professional manipulators and orators, right, rather than foundational philosophers.
If we are authors of universal consciousness, what is this universal consciousness?
There is it again. If we are, so he's I guess he's being honest that it's just something he has come up with, right? Okay, now what I'm hearing is something like somebody, let's say a father talking to the children and the father saying, okay, so if I can get a car next month, we can go on a summer vacation to Italy, right? So let's say I have the car. Now let's go and plan the vacation in Italy. Wouldn't the children say, wouldn't it be better to make sure that we can get the car before you plan the vacation to Italy? Supplying that you're not living in Italy already, right? But you understand my meaning, right? Somewhere else than where you are. So yeah, but if I can get the car, we can go to Italy. So let's go and talk about, Italy and planning Italy and look at books about Italy and check out pictures of Italy and planning whatever, this, that, and the other in Italy. But it's all depending on whether or not you can get that fucking car, right? Or whatever it is you need to go to Italy. So he's saying, yeah, I'm now pretending that car is given, right? So now I'm going to talk about Italy. I would say I'm not going anywhere before it has been established that there is a car. And if it's not a car, if there is a car, is not there is a car, right? As long as you're saying if, it means there isn't a car, in my opinion. So he keeps saying if, that means he can't go and talk about what follows from that if, before that if has been turned into, this is the philosophy.
Well, strictly speaking, from an analytic perspective, all that we need to know about it is that it is experiential in nature. In other words, that it entails subjectivity, that it is qualitative as opposed to purely quantitative. Quantities are descriptions of it, but in and of itself, it is qualitative, experiential, subjective, from its own perspective, even though it is objective from our perspective, in the same sense that the thoughts of another person are objective from your perspective, but they are subjective from their own perspective.
What? What? How can something be objective which I do not have access to? I don't have access to your philosophy and your thinking and your experience, right? You would say that yourself according to these dissociations. So how could whatever is going on, I might fabulate about what's going on in your mind? How can that possibly be objective? While my experience is subjective. So the objectivity I have an experience of your mind is subjective to me. So it's a subjective objectivity about something I do not have access to. I mean, what the fuck is this, man? What the hell has he been smoking, right? how am I going to use this in anything but armchair cloud castles, right? It's like if I'm going down, I have to pay for my tomatoes. And I have to, but your subjective mind, my subjective understanding of your subjective, my subjective understanding of your objective mind that says that it's €5 for the tomato, but you know, it's an if that you exist, but it's subjective for me that you're objectively telling me the price of the, I mean, it's like, oh man, right? Head explosion.
So all we need is to say that universal consciousness is essentially subjective. It entails what philosophers today call core subjectivity. Now, what is core subjectivity? Imagine.
So now he's bringing in his little cult family, right? This is what philosophers nowadays call, right? You are just a normal monkey. There are philosopher monkeys out there that I'm befriending, and I'm accepting what they say. These philosopher monkeys, they say that this is what it's called this, and it's sort of duping you into saying, okay, I'm too stupid because there are these philosopher monkeys who have to tell me how things are. And they are more than, I'm just me. They are a bunch of philosopher monkeys, so they're more powerful and smarter than me, so I just have to bow in the grovel and accept this if as if it's a fact, right?
That you are in a perfect sensor deprivation chamber where it's perfectly dark, perfectly silent, and you're floating in water and you don't even feel your skin touch.
How do you know you're floating in water if you're deprived of your senses? But then you have a sense of floating, right? So if you can't experience you're floating in water, you can't say you're floating in water. Right? I mean, if I can't experience that I'm on a bicycle, I can't say I'm on a bicycle. Even if I were on a bicycle, then I'm just saying, yeah, somebody told me I'm on a bicycle. But that's not being on a bicycle. That's somebody telling you you're on a bicycle. Or somebody telling you you're in water. But how would you know that you're floating in water if you can't, sense that you're in water? Then you don't know you're in water, right?
Touching anything. In other words, you have no perceptions. Now imagine further that you become amnesic for a moment while inside that sensory deprivation chamber. You don't know, you don't, no longer remember your name, you don't know where you were born.
Okay, this sort of a highly unlikely scenario, right? You can't use your senses, you're floating in water that you can't experience, there's no perception, and you lost your memory, and so on. Okay, I understand what he's trying to do, but imagine something that is quite impossible to be a reality, okay? I'm not particularly fond of that kind of a situation because it points to the ridiculousness of the philosophy he's trying to do, right? He's basically saying, forget all your perceptions, forget all, everything, right? All that you used in order to get where you are now, right? He's talking about that dashboard, right? That was the first thing. He's not saying, forget everything. Now come up with the dashboard. No. He did have to have an experience in order to talk about a dashboard that sort of enabled him to say there's something beyond the dashboard. And now he says, forget all about it. Just stay with my cloud castles of pure subjectivity without any perception or anything, memories or nothing, right? Even if you destroy the mind, apparently, or destroy the dissociation, there will still be some subjectivity left. That's what he's sort of fabulating about. Now, why the hell would I want to go there, right? He's basically talking about something he has no fucking access to, right? Why does he need to go there? What is it he is attempting to do, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm stepping out of that sensory deprivation chamber and hoping that my memory comes back, right? Because don't I need that? If I don't need it, why do I have it? So it's it is so far removed from an everyday experience, right? Now, at the end of the day, right? If you have a structure of your philosophy, and my structure is quite simple, it says first metaphysics done, then epistemology done, then objectivity done, then ethics done, and then you have a moral principle, right? Now, isn't morality something about how I interact with other individuals that could potentially work from a moral principle? Isn't that about my qualia and my cognitions and my interpretation of actions and science and all these categories and so on? Isn't that what ultimately where I have to go with my philosophy? I'm not staying somewhere in pure subjectivity, right? So why do I need to go back there where I can't go just to come back to my qualia and my cognitions and my categories and my idea of knowledge and my philosophy and my moral principles and so on? I still have to go there, right? So I'm sort of taking a step back into the cloud castles, then coming back to my qualia and my cognitions and so on. So I have not added anything. I'm just created some magical story of what goes on before it inevitably becomes the qualia anyway. Right? It's not like I'm stepping back into magic land, right? And then coming up with a new explanation of qualia. You could say it's an explanation, but whatever explanation I come up with, or Bernardo comes up with, it's still the same old fucking qualia, which then becomes my cognitions, like elephant and bicycle, right? And that's the bicycle. I want to know whether or not that dude over there can ride on my bicycle or not, right? Doesn't change the fucking bicycle, right? Whether or not there's a cloud castle somewhere behind those qualia.
You don't know what you do for a living, who you're married to, you forget everything. Now, for a moment, when you forget everything and you perceive nothing, only one thing will be left.
That's your story, right? How the hell would you know? Because you have never done that and nobody can go there, right? Yes, he says, if you could go there, this is what I'm saying that would be that. Well, I can't go there. So what the fuck why would I fucking care, right? If I go into a deprivation chamber and try to forget everything I know, and then I would have some kind of pure subjectivity. Okay, so what? I'm going back out of the deprivation chamber, reigniting my memories, and I go on my everyday on my bicycle eating tomatoes, right?
Which is pure subjectivity. It is a field with potential experiences, but no memories, no perceptions, no discernible particular experience, just a potentiality for experience, and a sort of I-ness, or a me-ness. I-ness would be better. A pure I-ness without a narrative of self-identity. That experience that would remain when you're completely amnesic in a perfect sensory deprivation chamber is what analytic philosophers call core subjectivity. It is subjectivity without a story.
Okay, so it's something similar to empty space, right? Empty space is not empty, it's still space, right? And when you start to put stuff into it, like a planet and, whatever, right, a star, then it's sort of, there are stuff in it. There are memories and there are perceptions, just like, but pure subjectivity is like empty space. To have an analogy to, what's it called? Astrology. So that's that. So he's creating this idea of this field, right? He's molding your mind into a certain direction, right? And then he will come back to tell you, yes, possibly, right? I'm sort of poisoning the well here, right? But I know where it's going. Then the mind is impressing a story on you, right? It's not you creating the story, it's the mind telling you what you're supposed to know, right?
Without the story of when you were born, what your name is, what you do, who you were married to. No, forget all that. Even your humanness can be forgotten. Just like a baby doesn't know he or she is human. A baby in an ideal sensory deprivation chamber, a newborn in an ideal sensory...
Okay, don't put your babies in deprivation chambers, right? Please. Now, I know this is a thought experiment, and this is sort of a philosophical discourse of a kind, right? But just be aware this is only, mental abstractions or mental thought, right? This is not about putting your children in deprivation chambers, please, right? I disclaim all these kinds of statements like that he's making, right?
The deprivation chamber would consist from the inside of pure core subjectivity. That's all there would be in the mind of the baby is pure core subjectivity. And that's what universal consciousness essentially is, core subjectivity.
No. Universal consciousness, well, if it's universal, isn't it then everything? Or what do you mean by universal, right? Because if you have removed perception and removed the other stuff, you must have removed something. And at least you're taking some part of that universality and saying, I'm not looking at that now, right? What is left? But then you have, in my opinion, appealed to some kind of dualism. You have removed something that isn't that which is left over, which is then universal. It almost sounds like a contradiction. It sounds like you're removing something and saying it's still there, but now it's still removed. I mean, it's this kind of Klaus Castle bullshit that I fucking hate, because he has basically said, don't trust your perceptions, don't trust your memories, just remove it and just consider yourself pure subjectivity, right? You can go anywhere now. You're not bound by your perception. You're not bound by your memories. You're not even bound by your own being, your own self. What was he called? It your meanness, your I-ness. What is this, man? Right? Where is it going? He's basically removing everything that I can possibly have access to, and then telling me, yeah, I'm going to look as what is left. It's a long time in this presentation since I left him behind, right? I'm not even close to being adhering to anything now. I have left it at the roadside many parts ago, right? I'm just doing this in order to clarify how fucking crazy it is, right? I mean, if you're going here with this, I have to classify you as willfully ignorant of good philosophy. You want to go there because you need to go there in order to justify whatever narrative or bullshit you're already believing in. And this fits the bill in order to get there in some sort of convoluted, soft manner, right? If you are adhering to this shit, I'm classifying you as a bullshitter rather than a philosopher, right? I have to. Because as I pointed out, there are so many plot holes here, right? And using various terms without any definition, just coming, oh, now I'm starting to say consciousness. Yeah, so I guess I can just do that because PhD, right? I mean, I'm not buying this. And don't throw this thing at me with, but he has written 10 books that you have to read before you can discard the philosophy, right?
Now, does it have its own experiences outside the experiences of living beings? It surely has, because when we look up to the sky, to the cosmos.
Look up to the sky. What do you mean, look up? Are you looking up as if you're looking outside or a particular direction in your... What is that? It sounds like you are talking about a direct experience of something outside your experience.
This is dynamic. There are stars going supernova, there are black holes, there are galaxies colliding. Stuff is happening.
But that is... But you are saying... You're talking about that dashboard that you have. And then you say, yes, there are gadgets out there. There are needles out there. There are scales out there. There are meters out there. No, there are not. Well, the correct answer is that you can't know that because you're describing your dashboard. And then you're sort of taking the leap that there's needles out there. That's what you're saying now. There are supernova. No, a supernova, it is a description of your experience. That's the dashboard, right? And now you're saying there are dashboards out there. I mean, how ridiculous is this, man, right? I mean, how more clear can I point out the dysfunction of this philosophy? He's basically starting out by saying, "Oh, you only have access to your dashboard," but I'm saying there are dashboard parts out there, and it's pure subjectivity. If you remove your experiences, if you remove the dashboard and you remove your awareness of your dashboard, and that you think of yourself as a pilot, remove that, and now I'm going to tell you that dashboards out there. I mean, this guy is fucking mentally ill, right? There's no bounds to him. He's removing everything that could possibly be a control mechanism of what the hell he's doing, right? And then he just goes mental on it, right? And comes up with all sorts of story about what he thinks is out there beyond that which is beyond his own experience in that which he can't experience, okay?
Now, stars are burning. Planets are moving around their orbits. Volcanoes are erupting in moons. A lot of stuff is happening. And that stuff is a representation on our dashboard of the mental activity of the universal consciousness. And if the representation is dynamic...
But you're talking, you are implicitly violating that which you're talking about. There are stars out there, but their representation as stars. But then there's not stars out there. You can't say there's stars out there, right? You can't say there aren't stars out there either. But then you would say that the experience is the same as that which you're experiencing. If it's not the same as that which you're experiencing, you have to stay with your experience and say, yeah, I have something I call stars. But that's not, I can't even know if that's out there. I'm just experiencing stars and supernovae or whatever story, right? He's saying you can't go there, but then he goes there anyway, right? Implicitly, without apparently realizing that that's what he's doing.
Dynamic.
I mean, this deep level of philosophy that is so flawed, right? That is apparently, and he's not even aware that he fucking does it, right? That is a trigger warning. That is a red flag the size of, a planet, right? It's like, no, I'm not going there, mate, right? You don't have a grasp of what you're doing, right? I mean, these deepest level of metaphysics, they have to be fucking strict, right? You can't just go, hey, there are planets and supernova. Hey, of course they are. It's just an experience, but it's out there, right? It's not, no. Hang on, mate, please, right? Oh.
Then there is dynamic stuff happening in universal consciousness.
How do you know? Just because you had an experience doesn't mean there's something going on that is in some kind of relation to that experience. That's just something you come up with, right? And if you have just removed your experiences and talking about this pure subjectivity, can you just re-add your perception and experience and your meanness and whatever it is, right? To it, it's like he's just sitting there juggling. Now he's disconnecting himself from anything and anyone that can sort of criticize him in any way, right? Because he's taking this leap based on an if. So I think I'm repeating myself here, right? So let's go.
Next to core subjectivity, which is what it is also having particular experiences, which are like excitations of core subjectivity. You can imagine core subjectivity as a guitar string. If the guitar string is at rest, there is no sound. But if you pluck it and you excite it, it makes a sound.
Okay, so what is plucking in mind at large, right? What is doing the plucking? Is it just self-plucking? Is the guitar string just all of a sudden starting to vibrate out of nowhere? What is going on? Okay, no, you would not delve into that. That's just sort of, that's just given. Yeah, you have vibrations, right? Yeah, I'm just coming up with vibrations. And I'm staying in this metaphor land, right? He's staying in metaphor land. He's not coming back to Qualia any day soon, right?
Experiences are the sounds of core subjectivity. But notice that there is...
The sounds? Okay, now we came back to Qualia, actually. But sounds and colors and taste and so on, right? The 5 Qualia. But it's sort of, now he says, okay, that experience you have is just the result of that which I came up with, right? It's what I came up with that is important. It's not your taste of it or your sound of it. That's just what it sounds like. It's more important what it is, because that's what I'm that's my fetish here, right? Being Bernardo Kastrup. I have a fetish of coming up with something that is the important part, where you just have some perceptions of it that are not really important. It's just the sound, right? Fuck the sound. It's what it really is that is important, right?
Nothing to the sound produced by a guitar string when you pluck it, other than the string itself. The only thing that exists is the string. Whether it's at rest or being excited, there is only the string. So there is...
Okay, so who gives a fuck about your Qualia, right? Your sound is not important. It's the string that is important. The string that he came up with as a metaphor to explain why you have a sound, right? But he's then saying to you, the sound is not really important. It's that it's a guitar string, right? And somebody is plucking it without me explaining why it's being plucked, so you can have a sound. Give me a break, man, right?
There's only core subjectivity, even if there are experiences, because experiences are excitations of the core subjectivity that the universal consciousness is.
If I had come up with another metaphysics than his, where I'm doing something maybe somewhat similar, but sort of different still, would that sound, whatever sound I would experience at any given moment, be different because I had another metaphysics, right? And would I, if it had been different, would I have come up with a different metaphysics to explain that different Qualia? So it's sort of, if I have a different metaphysics, I might have a different sound. Then I would have a different metaphysics. That would create a different sound. That would create a different metaphysics. That would create a different sound, and so on, right? But how did I get to this outside? Well, I had my sound. It's because of my sound. I came up with an explanation of why there is a sound. And if I might have come up with a different explanation, I might have had a different sound maybe, right? No, I would say you would still have the same sound. It's just all your cloud castle bullshit that might confuse you about whether or not there actually is a sound, or whether or not it's important to have that sound or not. You're just going around in these weird circles, these epicycles, whatever it is, bullshit, right?
And then you might ask, okay, what do those experiences of universal consciousness feel like? And the only honest answer is, I don't know, and nobody alive can know. We are dissociated from it. All we can access are the representations, the extrinsic appearances of those experiences as
But you could tell me that there's something there. You could just not tell me what it's like. But what tool do you use to get there then, other than what it's like? It's your qualia, the what it's like, that you was working from in the first place. You call that the dashboard, right? That apparently is your starting point. You have this dashboard. And then for some kind of magical reason, you can go on and fabulate about what is there. And then you go back and say, well, I can experience it. I mean, well,
presented on our dashboard. And we call them galaxies and galaxy clusters and supernovae and black holes and quasars and whatnot, planets and moons and volcanoes and rocks. But how they feel from their own first-person perspective, we cannot know. What we can say...
But now you're saying a supernova is a person? A first person? Aren't you personifying, what's it called? Reifying, giving it, imbuing life or livingness to all aspects? It's all alive out there, right? Something like that. So I'm now creating a god here, right? You can see it all come together now, right? It's sort of a god out there. You understand its mind. You don't know what it's doing, right? It's doing something. And you're only seeing the slideshow picture of it, right? That you have to interpret somehow, but you're too stupid, right? You're just a fucking monkey.
Is the following. There may be a temptation to equate universal consciousness with a divinity, with God.
Okay, so that's my point we're going into now.
Difficult to say whether I think this is a good idea or not, because I don't know what most people mean by God. There are probably 7.5 billion different definitions of God in the world today. So whatever I say, it will make no sense.
No, but you are bringing it into the fray, right? You are mentioning God and saying, I don't know if it's a good idea, right? Okay, but then why are you bringing it in if you don't think it's a good idea? You might actually think it's a good idea. You just have to pretend to be skeptic here, right? But you're mentioning God, right? Just bringing it out of nowhere in order to say, I'm not really sure about this. But you bring it in so that those who want it to be brought in are satisfied that you're bringing it in, right? It's pure sophistry, this, right?
So I'll limit myself to say something that I can say with some confidence.
He's basically saying, I'm okay with you talking about God in this context here, right? I'm not sure it's a good idea, but I'm sort of okay you saying God, right? So bring in the crazies, right?
Are self-aware. We have what psychology calls metacognition. In other words, not only do we experience, we know that we experience. We explicitly recognize ourselves as a subjective entity that has experiences.
Maybe the idea of self is what is metaconsciousness. That metaconsciousness is not aware of me, but it's metaconsciousness that is me. Now, another thing is, okay, there's an awareness of whatever's going on. Is that also mind? Or consciousness? Or all these various terms he has been using so far, right? How are they, how do you, I mean, it's this dissociation thing I have a a big problem with, right? I'm okay with being dissociated from something that isn't mind, or that is undescribable and likely not mind, right? In my opinion, that there is a dissociation, and the dissociation is there because what is on the other side is not mind. That's why there is a dissociation. That makes more sense to say that there is my mind that is made of mind, then there's dissociation that is made of mind, and there's something beyond dissociation that is also mind. It's like water separated by water, and then there's water on the other side. No. That doesn't work for me, right?
And that's why we say, I have hunger, or I feel sad, as opposed to I am hunger and I am sadness. This distinction between our experiences and our core subjectivity, this distinction between the guitar string excited and the guitar string at rest, is what metacognition allows us to make. It allows us to think.
Okay, but then you can't have that sensory deprivation chamber you had before. If you're removing the experiences and the me and the whatever, then how can you experience it? So you are explicitly saying you are referring to something that you cannot possibly experience, because you can experience it and you can be aware of that experience you do not have, which you are claiming to be a leftover called pure subjectivity or something like that, right? Universal consciousness. So you are working with something that is impossible to get to as a human being, right? Is this the foundation of your philosophy? Then I'm saying you're fucking bullshitting me, right? You're creating something that is so abstract and at the same time very convoluted and highly unlikely, in my opinion, and saying, universal consciousness, man, right? Done. I've done it. Now I can go and blame Putin, right?
Think about our thoughts, to ponder our emotions. And this metacognition as a mental function has evolved at very great cost, over 4 billion years of evolution on a planetary ecosystem. The universal consciousness.
But you need your experience and your interpretation of those experiences in order to get that to that evolution. And if that is not the thing you're describing, then evolution is not going on out there. It's only going on in your mind as an interpretation of these perceptions that you just removed in order to get to that universal consciousness. There are some leaps here that don't function, right? I have lost a bit of oversight of what he's talking about. I have to admit that, right? And then it in itself is a red flag to me, right? It's not going to say, okay, I lost, it's because he's so smart, I am stupid. I'm not buying that in any day, right? Your philosophy has to be easily digestible, in my opinion. Otherwise, I will consider it bullshit. I don't buy any day this thing, you have to read these 10 books and this curriculum of 3,000 years of philosophy, and then you have to remove your perceptions and sit in a chamber and come up with the evolution of a universal mind, and no, get it out of my face, right? I have to go down to the store and find some tomatoes. I want to figure out if I can just grab those tomatoes or I have to do something else, right? At the end of the day, that's what's interesting, because somebody who also wants those tomatoes might want to fucking kill me if I'm going to take those tomatoes, right? I don't care about your fucking universal mind shit, right?
Did not have to undergo evolution within a planetary ecosystem.
I don't care about it if you're not going to end up in some kind of explanation of what to do in that particular case. Or at least a principle I can apply in order to get there, right? If you're staying in this weirdo cloud castle, I don't give a fuck, to be honest, right?
Ecosystem. It never has had to react to environmental challenges and eke out a living. It is unlikely that it is metacognitive itself, because metacognition very much seems to be the end result of 4 billion years of evolution. So we have it. My cat has less of it. The amoeba swimming on my garden pond probably has none of it. Are all three of them, I, my cat, and the amoeba, alters of the universal consciousness?
So you have a garden pond? Kind of old school, isn't it?
I think so. We are all three living, metabolizing entities. which is the sort of empirical giveaway of a dissociative process in the mind of nature. But not all three are metacognitive.
The mind of nature. No, you can't do that. So the mind of nature, that's something that is inside nature then. So wasn't nature that which you now call mind or consciousness? So what is nature then? Is nature that which is outside dissociated minds? So my mind is not nature. How are these categories established, and what are their boundaries, and what are their meanings? You can't just sit there and throw around term if it's given, because you're basically saying, I have to remove all of that in order to get to that pure subjectivity. So you're starting to build your whole world from pure subjectivity, or at least that's what I'm hearing, right? So you can't refute nature is an interpretation of something, right? Or are you equivocating two words, and then why are you using two different words for the same reference, right?
Only the most evolved one, me, seems to be metacognitive. So metacognition seems to be a product of evolution, that we conquered at great cost over a very long time. It doesn't seem to be there from the beginning. Otherwise, maybe amoeba.
And because of metaconsciousness, and I have a language, I can possibly be screwed around with some other mind calling itself a philosopher, right? So if I want this kind of aware and have the ability to be influenced by philosophy, I would actually possibly be more happy rather than having to be influenced by all these idiots, right? And parents and teachers and bullshitters, right? Politicians. A cat is probably more, it doesn't even have an idea of happiness, right? So it doesn't have an idea of suffering. So all these suffering idiots out there trying to convince me of their weirdo philosophy. So I have to keep deconstructing and rejecting the shit, right? Rather than being an amoeba, just existing. It's a lack of happiness. It's actually more happy because a lack of being able to be happy is more like you're probably going to suffer more than being happy. Maybe I'm going on a tangent here, I don't know. But it's like, I mean, does this dude here, right? Does he look like a happy man, right? Does he look like somebody who's sort of confident and have a happy life or something? He feels like a freak to some extent, right? I'm being a bit hard here, maybe. But, I mean, yes, you have to do some foundational metaphysics, in my opinion. It's very important in your philosophy. At least it is in my philosophy. So I would encourage you to think along those lines and check out whether or not you wouldn't think that foundational metaphysics would also be important for your philosophy, right? But this guy has gone completely mental in this metaphysical cloud castle realm, right? Where he's sort of basing everything on an if and coming up with stories that can explain something that doesn't change that which he's trying to explain anyway, right? And his whole life seems to be revolving around this. And this Essentia Foundation, he's like he's possessed or something, right? And if there were, I mean, I recently deconstructed an article on the Essentia website about somebody claiming to have bridged Hume's is-ought gap, or at least sort of referring to finding an ought or something like that. And it's absolutely amateurishly, disgustingly bad, right? And at the same time, they stated this is one of the best articles we have published on our site. This points in the direction that they're only living in their metaphysical cloud castles. They have absolutely fucking no idea what it means to do ethics, right? Absolutely, completely disconnected. And apparently they think that because they have come up with this cloud castle metaphysics, everything just pops out of that. by its nature of its superiority, right? You don't even have to do epistemology or ethics anymore because this metaphysics is so fucking great that it just pops out of it somehow, right? Apparently. Because I have not seen any epistemology or ethics for that matter, right? From any of, neither Bernardo Kastrup or any other person associated with the Essentia Foundation, other than just pure undisclosed philosophy, just sort of moral statements grabbed out of nowhere without any appeal to any philosophy considered epistemology or ethics, right? So I have not really much patience with this analytic idealism because it seems to be something. Now I have come up with cloud castles. Now I'm going to stay in the cloud castles because that's what's important. Those stupid sounds and tastes and so on, that's just some unimportant echo of the big mind, right? Fuck off.
Those would be metacognitive. And I know some scientists would say, you know what, Bernardo, amoeba can even build their own conical shaped houses by picking up mud particles from the bottom of your garden pond. And I know that can happen. But I think we could all agree that lower life forms, not in an ethical sense, lower in an evolutionary sense, exhibit a lot less signs of a metacognitive.
Lower in an ethical sense? So you can talk about lower beings in an ethical sense? How does this work? What's that ethics? Please enlighten me on the ethics. And please be settled on your metaphysics and your epistemology before you start to lecture me on ethics here, please, right?
Cognition than higher, more evolved life forms. Metacognition does not seem to be there.
So we're classifying into higher or lower, right? So he's sitting there with his monkey mind and telling you there are beings out there that are objective, though you can't get to them, that don't have this fancy expansion pack called awareness or meta-consciousness that I have, but I can't go there, but I'm telling you, they might not have it, right? And the amoeba, which is an experience on my dashboard, which is not important, but it's important to get to the metaphysics. But when I got to the metaphysics, that experience is no longer important because I have to deprive myself of these weirdo qualia and you know, oh man, right? Oh.
From the get.
And he's talking about parsimony, right? Okay, in his mind, it might feel like it's parsimonious. But if it's based on ridiculous or even lacking philosophy, I wouldn't consider it parsimonious. It's just simplistic, without any sensitivity towards whether or not this is good philosophy or not. Right? Yeah, you can possibly create parsimoniously by saying it's all gummy bears. That's very parsimonious. But where the hell did you get that from, right?
Does not seem to be there from the beginning. It's not there in mosquitoes. It's not there in frogs. It's not.
Okay, so now he's been outside his own mind to tell you that there's not a particular kind of mind in other minds. How does he get to that? That's pure fabulation, right? He's making a statement that cannot possibly be founded in anything according to his own philosophy.
There in fish. At least we have no reasons to think that it is there. But it is there in...
Okay, so you have no reason to think it. That doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you can't find a reason. Just because you can't find a reason to reject a teapot around Jupiter doesn't mean there is a teapot around Jupiter, right? Or it doesn't mean that you can say there isn't a teapot around. Just because you have no good reason to say there is a teapot doesn't mean there isn't a teapot around Jupiter. You would have to say, I can't fucking get to it, right? This fetish fetishists need to go and fabulate about that which you cannot get to is the problem. Leave it the fuck alone. Give me your classification of your qualia and what you do about them in your everyday and what moral principles you're following and your idea of knowledge and how to get there and definitions of truth and objectivity and, existence and whatever, right? Do that rather than try to go beyond that which you can go beyond, right?
People. It may be there in pachyderms, elephants. It may be there in cetaceans, whales and dolphins. And it's certain.
It may be there. It may be this, and maybe that, and maybe this. Give me a break. I don't care. I don't care what you think may be there or may not be there, right? A philosophy, if you have a philosophy that you are not telling anybody else about, fine. Knock yourself out with your own philosophy. But as soon as you start to try to inflict it on other people and me, right? Then I'm going to scrutinize you, right? And you're inflicting it on me by sitting there talking to yourself, right? Or talking to whatever you're talking to, the big mind out there, whatever you're doing, right? Then I have to scrutinize you. If we have to come to some kind of agreement in some kind of moral principle or something like that, we have to be in agreement about each of our experiences somehow, right? Or otherwise, it's everyone for himself, right? And we don't need a moral principle. We don't need a morality. Then don't give me any talk about morality or talk about you should do this or you shouldn't do that or these people should do this or shouldn't do that, right? And if you want to go in a direction ultimately to ethics and a moral principle, then we need to have some kind of agreement of what we are having a moral principle about. And what we have access to is our experiences, right? You have to go and sit there and look at the camera and tell somebody to turn on the camera, and you have to make these sounds so I can understand them using perception and so on, right? If I have to communicate a moral principle or my moral principle, I have to use your perception. I cannot communicate it any other way, right? So if we have to interact and communicate, we have to use perception. And in order to use perception and language and so on, we have to have an agreement about what we are talking about. So then we are referencing our perceptions. Unless you just want to stay in your fucking cloud castles, right? Then I don't care. Why would I fucking care, right? Well, I might want to actually care because you are not staying in your cloud castles. You have constantly moralized about this, that, and the other, about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Putin and other stuff, right? About these people being like this and shouldn't do this or should do that, right? Only based on your cloud castles. Because I haven't seen any established metaphysics that I can comprehend, right? And I certainly haven't seen any epistemology or any ethics, right? And I haven't seen any rigid definitions of any terms used in these particular kinds of philosophy that would enable you to go and tell me about what people should or shouldn't do. So if you're going in your cloud castle, please stay there and shut the fuck up about anything about what people should or shouldn't do.
Certainly they're in humans. So I think we can say with some confidence that the universal consciousness outside...
Some confidence, right? Okay, we can say with some... There's no we, right? There's no we that can say. You can say it and impress it on me that I should go and be the same as you, right? So you're trying to twisting my arm around linguistically. I say, I think we can, with some certainty or some confidence, we can say this. I don't like this fluffy philosophy that is sort of half-ass soaked in sophistry, right? I have no patience with this, right?
Highly evolved life forms is not metacognitive. If you apply the word God to it, then you have a God that is a natural God, a God that acts spontaneously.
Yeah, so now we're going to God mode, right? Okay, so that's why. Now I'm talking to the crazy people that I want to rally behind me because I need somebody at least to cushion my weird philosophy. And these weirdos, they are in that weirdo land already. They just need me to say God and then have set the secret password, right? And now they're rallying behind me because they would like to have some kind of pretense of rigid philosophy to cushion their bullshit thinking or their child abuse, basically, right? Which religion is. It's just fucking mental child abuse. They don't want to go back to their parents and say, what the hell did you do to me when I was a child? No, they rather go and say, there's somebody who says here that my mommy is not crazy. And they were not abusing me. She was actually just talking about that mind out there, right? So you don't have to confront your parents, but you can cushion them in this bullshit philosophy and go on as if whatever you're doing is okay, right? I don't buy it, man. Okay, we are past the 1 hour mark. I think I'd leave it here at 9:45 in his part 5. Yes, part 5, episode 5. Sorry. And please share, like, and subscribe. Consider a donation, or give me a comment below. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.